At this time, we'll call to order the regular city council meeting for March 28, 2022. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Deputy Clerk Piper, could you mark it that all council members are here today? Thank you. Move on from the roll call to the approval of city council minutes, March 14th, 2022. Councilmember Kennedy.
I'll move the minutes.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. No bills this evening. We'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Councilmember Kennedy.
I'll move the agenda.
I'll support.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. For this time, we'll open the floor for public comment. Please remember to state your name and address, and please remember we have a 2-minute time limit. All right, we'll close the floor for public comment, and we'll move on to the discussion of downtown, and filling in for Nate Mack tonight, City Manager Zelnick.
I'm here today to answer any questions that any of the council members may have regarding the economic development and EDA director's report that was provided to you in the packet.
Oh, Councilmember
I raised my
Goldwyn.
hand the wrong way. I just wanted to know, was it correct that he was saying there was going to be something around 40 to 45 booths at the Common Park?
It's correct, we're expecting an increase in the number. We're looking at perhaps expanding to the south parking lot, and that's kind of what we're working on right now.
That's amazing. That's great. Thank you. Okay, so what's next?
Councilmember Kimball, go ahead.
I was curious, what was the outcome on planning's meeting for the approval of the puppy overnight thing?
It was approved at the planning commission meeting last week.
Okay. Let's see, the next one was the apartment submission was supposed to take place today. Did that happen?
I have not seen those documents. I'm not sure if Terry did receive them in the building department or whether it's taken by the planning. Judy, perhaps, did you see them come in at all today or not?
I did not, I did not see it.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Kennedy.
I think this was mentioned to Nate once before. Do you know where we stand on the repair of the clock downtown? I know the base has been repaired, but I'm waiting for the time mechanism.
Yeah, I know the base was repaired a couple weeks ago. Nate had contacted them back regarding the rest of it. I'm not sure if it's parts or what it was, but he did contact them again regarding making those repairs. Because each one of the sides is actually different, so a couple of them are working, a couple of them are not.
So we don't.
It might be the whole change in daylight savings time or not changing in daylight savings time. I don't know. When I do know the answer, I'll have to make sure to report it to the council.
Okay.
Anyone else have anything on downtown? All right, great. We'll move on to the fire chief report. Filling in tonight, Deputy Chief Weir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Just one thing for you this evening, just wanted to let everybody know that firefighters on March 19th attended the multi-jurisdictional rescue task force training along with Lyon Township, South Lyon Police Department, several other agencies. That took place over South Lyon East, so continuing to train for the worst and hopefully we never have to. If anybody else has any questions on the weekly report that you're going to submit to the council.
Councilmember Criswell, go ahead.
You know, Deputy Chief, I just wanted to say, and I don't think we say this enough, we are always commendatory to yourself and the chief, but we probably have the best volunteer staff of firefighters that are in the area. I've met a couple of them. Their commitment is unbelievable. They are truly dedicated professionals, and please carry back, you know, my condemnations board, and I'm sure everybody else here on council, that they are just the best volunteer firefighters in the area.
Well, thank you for saying that, I'll certainly pass that along.
Yeah. Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Councilmember Kimball, go ahead.
Are you satisfied with the labeling of the doors, firehouse?
So, They're getting relabeled, they're getting fixed. Yeah, so they came out, before we had approved the final, they should have been all level and lower on the doors, so that is getting addressed and they are getting correct.
Anyone else have anything for Deputy Chief Weir tonight? Thanks for answering that.
I did want to comment on the joint exercise that fire department took part in. I know it's disheartening but needed and for those sorts of trainings to take place. I was wondering if you might be able to share a little bit as far as the cooperation between the school district as well as the fire department and law enforcement for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly any one of these events is going to, it takes, a village to be able to accomplish an event like that. So the coordination, and this is not the first time we've done one of these trainings. We shoot for annually. The ability to include other jurisdictions is huge because they're the ones that are going to be coming back us up or us to them. So the coordination has always been fantastic. The school's always been on board. They're always allowing us to go to their facilities to drive for tour or to do these scenario type activities. So yeah, it's been fantastic. It's a good training that a lot of our people that have not been to yet were able to attend. So we have been a great turnout from our department. Which is fantastic. They're getting some exposure to the scenario-based activities.
Thank you.
All right, thanks Deputy Chief Weir. Great update. Police Chief report with Chief Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. A couple things. We're having a ribbon cutting ceremony for our generator that's being delivered April 8th, so if you would like to attend, just kidding, we're not having a ceremony, but it's coming April 8th at 9 o'clock. The installation is actually on its way to Green Oak, so we're happy it's finally going to get here, so really good. Install and test everything at April 8th, so we're happy about that. Our Comcast Business Solutions, our internet and our service provider phones has been phenomenal since we got it, so no issues, hasn't gone down at all, so we're very thankful that we invested in Comcast. No issues. We just sent 2 of our officers, Tim Rapp and Joe Chapsky, to Evidence Tech School. It's a 2-week training, so they kind of educate, kind of train the trainer. They will kind of come back and teach us what to do or what not to do on certain crime scenes. The major crime scenes also, obviously, we're going to be if we need to use Oakland County Sheriff's Department, we will do that. But most of the stuff we're going to be actually evidence collecting. We have some in-house experts now, so they got back from 2-week training for that. Our cadet Toharski is doing a good job. She recently passed her reading and writing class, and she's taking the physical agility test in April. Shouldn't be a problem for her at all. The other cadet I had mentioned last meeting, he took another job with another agency. We didn't get him in time, so we put out our applications, and we have 2 people that we're going to take a look at sometime this week. So we're looking to replace Kyle Barron, our cadet who's leaving April 1st. He is pursuing a career at a federal agency. So we're looking forward to just kind of recycling them and getting some people. Also, the SRO discussion in your package you guys have, I believe it was a letter that I sent to Paul regarding this discussion about the SRO and the updated contract. This is not set in stone. This is something like a recommendation that we want to bring to you. So I think eventually, probably in a meeting in April, we'll come with a more formal discussion. We want you guys to be informed. We guys want you to have some input, and so we can agree on a number that we can present to Archibald, Superintendent Archibald, on what we think is going to be a good number to have Officer Walton back in the school. We had a brief meeting, Paul and I and Patricia, a week or 2 ago, and it seemed to be that he was willing to do whatever it took to get Officer Walton, retain him for next year, for the entire school year. So he was very positive about what's going to happen. Well, so you have the information in the packet. That is just for discussion, so you guys can take a look over. We will bring it forward to you in a more formal discussion on a new business item sometime in April. So if you have any questions about that information or anything else I presented, we have an answer for you.
Councilman Fritzl.
Chief, I want to thank you for getting on board with this sooner rather than later. I think that the pressure that was put under the city employees last November, December, was unbelievable, and it could have been prevented. So I'm glad that somebody is taking proactive steps to get this in line now, because we have scarce resources over here too, and our staff is busy doing things. We have a road village coming through. It's going to be hectic in terms of dealing with those issues, and we really don't need to be dropping everything to deal with an issue that could have been solved sooner rather than later. So I want to thank you for the proactiveness that is being done. And I want to thank the school district for meeting with you and getting on board to get this taken care of. The thing that I'm going to be looking for, and I assume that when you say we're going to be talking about this in April, is that we're going to be talking about it during the budget, during the discussion for the police department?
I am sure that will come up, yes.
Okay, because that's what I would think,
Yes.
that's what would come up. I would like to have a fairly detailed list, and if possible, it would be appreciated if you could address issues that were presented by Councilman Kennedy and Councilman Kibble. They did bring up some issues, and so I'd like to see those addressed at that meeting. So this gives you time to sit back, either meet with them individually or discuss with them what the issues were. But I did pull out Mr. Kibble's document this afternoon and took a look at it, and he had some legitimate issues in terms of numbers. So I don't know if the number presented in this document includes his work or his notes or not, but
It was a foundation, something to start with, and something they would continue to work on and present to the next meeting.
so maybe at the meeting when we're talking about the police, you will have had those discussions with Councilmember Kennedy and Councilmember Kibble, and then we'll know what the difference is between their adjustments and the number that's sitting in here.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Kennedy, go ahead.
So Chief, based on your, what you presented, are they locked in on Officer Walton? Is that the individual they want? or-
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're very pleased with them from the administration. We taught a math class today. They were pretty happy with short staff as far as teaching, so we actually taught a math class. So they've had some really good, materials from them, and the administrators really enjoyed having him down there, and he's working out just fine.
That's great. Okay, thank you.
Councilman Kennedy, go
I
ahead.
just think
Or,
that,
Kibble, sorry.
that in itself, that they're asking for him specifically, I think is really speaks volumes about his place exactly where he should be for us.
He's made quite an impression down there, so yeah.
You want to say anything, Chief? All right, thanks for the update, Chief. No unfinished business tonight, so we'll move on to new business. Number 1, bond council engagement.
Based on the city's need for review and preparation of materials relating to the proposed ballot proposal for the road improvement program, we are engaging the assistance of Miller Canfield. Tonight, we have a memo from our bond council outlining their role and services to be provided, the conflict of interest policy and fees, and the street improvement bond proposal language. It's included within your packet. We expect that this item will be brought back at a future meeting for approval. Possible course of action tonight: approve or not approve the hire of Miller Canfield, Paddock, and Stone PLC to assist the city in the preparation of items related to the unlimited tax general obligation bond, road bonds. Patrick McGow from Miller Canfield is here to help answer any questions that you may have regarding this proposal.
Councilman Kibble, go ahead.
It seems like there's been significant product already produced, so that's kind of an interesting thing considering we're, just getting this language now and the price point hadn't been squared up. The one thing I wanted to take note of was that on the April 25th meeting, it says that the meeting is at 7 o'clock, and that's going to be 7:30 for meetings, start at 7:30.
I'm sorry, which page was that on?
The notice for the meeting on the 25th, I think it's the second page.
Page 9.
Actually, the second page.
Yeah.
You see if it's out there. That's all I can put in the packet.
Councilman Herzl, go ahead.
I'm going to move to approve the hiring of Miller Canfield, Paddock, and Stone to assist the city in the preparation of items related to the unlimited tax general obligation road bonds.
We have a motion by Councilmember Kurtzwell, supported by Councilmember Kennedy. Councilmember Kurtzwell, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, I had a couple of questions. One of the questions I had about the documents that were presented, some of it I just, for informational purposes, it says in here that you will assist in preparing the application to the Michigan Department of Treasury if necessary for approval of bonds. Why does the state need to get involved in the actual approval of the bond? What is their role in that? Do they approve the form? Are they approving the dollar amount? What is it that they are approving?
I'll have to answer that. So the state process when you issue bonds is each year the city files its annual audit, and there's a qualifying statement that goes along with that. It asks about 10 or 12 questions about the city's finances, making sure it's complying with various state laws on finances. And if the city is in compliance, it is granted qualified status, which means that the city can issue bonds throughout the next year without having to get permission from Treasury. If there's something in the audit that creates a problem or in the qualifying statement and it's not addressed, then the state declares the municipality not qualified. And then any bond issue that would be done in the next year has to go through an application process. So usually the city has been qualified, so that wouldn't be necessary. But if a municipality is not qualified, what the state then does is look at all the various documents, why were you not in compliance with various things related to finances, etc. So that's a little longer application process, so hopefully would not be necessary. But if it was, that would be something into the system.
I don't recall anything in the audit that would condition the issuance of the bonds from a treasury standpoint. Maybe there is, yeah.
Mayor,
Yes.
So it's a separate form that we file after annual financial statements are filed with the state of Michigan. It's something that I have to do before the end of the calendar year, which will be 6 months after the close of our fiscal year, the qualifying statement. And basically it takes information within the annual financial statements and it's just put into a separate document that's reviewed by a separate department within the Department of Treasury. And then once it's been approved, we receive a letter that tells us until the following end of the calendar year, which again would be 6 months after the end of our audit, we are able to issue bonds if necessary.
Have you received that letter?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so that's not enough. Okay. The next thing in here that I found a little bit curious when I was reading this is that you said that you were not registered municipal advisors under Dodd-Frank. But isn't that what you're doing?
No, that's not the role that I'm performing. So
Okay.
what we're doing is the legal work related to the bond issue, and then the next item on your agenda is approving the municipal financial advisor to act in financial capacity. So if I could just give a little bit of background, because you may recall that I was at meetings by Zoom last summer when we were talking about road villages, road bonds. There were a couple of opinion letters that we drafted kind of discussing those options. And the conclusion after that process was the city was looking at doing a road bond to take to the voters this year. So this is really sort of the next step from that. So, I mean, you're correct that there has been a lot of work done because we started this discussion last summer. We had various discussions about millage proposals, bond proposals, the timing, the structure, and so this is sort of now getting now to the planning stage. So the next item on the agenda is the actual financial analysis on the bond packaging, the dollar amount, the millage impact, et cetera. And so what I did tonight was, and we were, last summer, it was a discussion about road improvements and how to finance it. So now we're at the stage where we're looking at beginning the process for a road bond proposal to take to the voters, and that's why you're seeing these documents here tonight. So what I had prepared was the resolution, which is a draft, so you can see what it would look like. Again, that's to be considered for approval if you decide to proceed next month. But I wanted to get that language in front of you, and I included what are the current numbers being discussed, just so you see how that would look to the voters. So that's the other item that's in your documents, which is that resolution, as well as the actual ballot proposal. Of course, all that's subject on how you ultimately decide on whether to proceed with it or whether that's the right structure. And then the engagement letter was really, these are the types of things that we do as bond lawyers in connection with assisting with this process. And then there's another professional consultant, who's the next item on the agenda, that does the actual financial analysis.
And what is an example, or what are some examples of monitoring compliance with tax requirements with respect to the issuance of those bonds? What kinds of things would an auditor or compliance officer be looking for? And I assume it's the compliance testing after issuance?
Right, so there's about 2 or 3 different things after a bond issue to make sure that the city is in compliance. The first one is the use of the improvements. So for road projects, that's pretty straightforward. These are going to be owned and used by the city as part of your road network. It's a little more complex if you're doing a building, because you may have some private leases or something like that that would require monitoring in the event there was a private party using bond finance proceeds to make sure that whatever those arrangements were met the requirements of tax code for tax exempt financing. The other thing that comes up is the investment of the bond proceeds and the expenditure of the bond proceeds after the issuance to make sure that the timing of the expenditure complies with the tax rules, as well as if there is a situation where the city has bond proceeds and requires arbitrage or rebate calculations, we can advise on that to see if there's anything that needs to be done if the money is not spent in a due process. So there are various things that can happen after a bond issuance related to the project or the investment of funds that may have an impact on the tax status of funds.
Next, on page 4, you say it's our understanding that final size, composition, timing of the bonds has not yet been determined. But I thought we did. Our timing is putting it on the ballot in August. I thought the amount that we were looking at was roughly 18 million plus adding whatever costs or whatever. So I thought that some of that was already predetermined, or are we not there yet?
Well, you weren't there when I wrote that letter, which
Okay.
I don't have that in front of me, but that was earlier in March. There have been a couple revisions to the numbers, because ultimately, what the financial plan has been was to try to achieve a certain millage rate. And so there's been a lot of emails back and forth amongst the finance team with various assumptions about taxable value and timing. So you're right, the timing is the one you're taking to the voters has been discussed last year. But actually, the timing of when we issue the first series, the second series, how many series, what each of those series is, was something that hadn't been determined. It's really not determined until you guys decide on it. So that's why we didn't know what that was several weeks ago, because those discussions have been going. And then ultimately, that's something I think we can discuss here tonight in terms of deciding to proceed if those are the right assumptions to use and the right dollar amounts that we're going to be looking to ask the voters to approve.
And the type of bond that's being issued, we have that in here. The type of bond we're looking at is an unlimited tax general obligation, correct?
Correct.
So what would our option be? When you say what type of bond? I thought the bond is going to be the unlimited.
We do know that now. Again, you hadn't officially decided on issuing bonds yet. So there have been various things that we talked about in terms of timing.
And then I had, I believe, one more question, and that has to do with reimbursement, allocation of capital expenditures. And that is on page 2 of the resolution.
Right.
And it's paragraph 5. So if we, in October, spent $500,000 hiring an engineering firm to come in and start preliminary work in anticipation of the bond passing, and we plan to pull that out of either our general fund or maybe we have money set aside in another line item. Are you saying here that that $500,000, we submit a reimbursement, we request to be reimbursed that $500,000 and that we come back to the city? Do we pay that out of the bond and we get reimbursed for it?
Yes. So that yes is the short answer. The longer answer is that whenever, it's not so much the engineering. You're allowed, if the bonds are approved and issued, you can go back in time and reimburse for all the engineering, design, planning, legal costs that occurred relating to that project. This is really more specifically about if you started spending money on construction, or if you needed a land acquisition, or something you did before the bonds were issued, you would be able to go back in time and reimburse for those as well. And so the example here would be, let's say the voters approved the bonds in November, but we don't issue the bonds until June of 2023. You could start work in the spring and actually pay some money in advance, and then when the bonds are issued, use that to reimburse yourself. So this declaration is essentially indicating that you give yourself that flexibility. You're not required to do that, but you're not allowed to spend money to reimburse for construction costs before the bonds are issued unless you have that type of declaration. So that's really there to give you flexibility. If for some reason some work gets started before the bond proceeds are actually available, you can then reimburse yourself with the bond proceeds.
Now, we're issuing a bond in a market where inflation is high, so interest rates are rising. So you have that inverse relationship between the price of the bond, what the bond sells for, when you have high interest rates. So how does that affect our sales as we move forward?
So the actual interest rate on the bonds will not be determined until you sell the bonds. And we will be looking at a competitive sale and taking the rates at that time. Now, you say interest rates are high. I would say interest rates are certainly going up from where they were several months ago.
That's what I meant to say.
But from a historical standpoint, interest rates are still relatively low looking at the last 20 years. So ultimately, we don't know what the interest rates will be on the bonds. The financial advisor has projections. I'll let him talk about that. I'll let him predict the market rate. That's his time. And ultimately, though, the interest rate on the bonds will be determined when we go to sell the bonds, and it'll be based on the bids received in the market at that time. Municipal bonds are still selling very well. I'll let Steve talk about this, but rates, for, and again, we're talking about a 10-year bond here, are still relatively low compared to other types of bonds.
And when we submit a request for reimbursement for monies from that bond, does that then become a trigger for a compliance issue?
Not really. So it's not even a request for reimbursement. The way this would work would be that, and I think there's a schedule in the next packet. We're talking about selling bonds in early 2023. So we would advertise the sale of the bonds, take bids, award the lowest interest rate, and then roughly 3 weeks later, you would have the bond proceeds from that first issue. So roughly, $8.7 million. That would be held by the city treasurer in the construction fund and used to pay disbursements. So there's not somebody else you need to ask for permission to pay those. You control the money, and then it's just a matter of then reimbursing for that prior invoice that had been paid, to have that money transferred back to the general fund or Act 51 monies, wherever it was that you spent that. So you will control the bond proceeds after the bonds are sold and delivered, and then be able to make those disbursements as you go through the construction period.
Thank you, been very, very helpful.
Councilmember Hanson, go ahead.
So I had a question regarding Exhibit A, the street improvements bond proposal. Now, if approved, the estimated millage to be levied in 2023 is 1.9946 mils, approximately $1.99 per thousand of taxable value. And the estimated simple average annual millage rate required to retire the bonds is 4.0894 mils, which is approximately $4.09 per $1,000 of taxable value. I was just hoping for the record, because we're going to be presenting this to voters, if you could explain the difference between estimated simple average and the estimated millage.
Sure. So what you're looking at is the proposed bond proposal form. And I will say right now that almost everything in there is required to be there according to state law. And so that last sentence that you're reading from, the state law for bond proposals says that every ballot question for a bond proposal has to state the estimated first year millage rate and then the average millage rate over the life of the bonds. And so that's what that is. And in that language, the estimated simple average millage rate is simply the average over those 10 years that we're looking at that the debt millage would be levied for 2 series of bonds.